Imagine a world without rabbits, indigo snakes, owls, and many other animals. This could be a reality if we don't have the gopher tortoise. The gopher tortoise is very important to this area due to many different reasons, but most importantly, its burrows. The gopher tortoise is threatened by many different things, but most importantly, the lack of controlled fires. The gopher tortoise is a keystone species. This means that the gopher tortoise is extremely important to its environment, and without it, many other organisms would die.
And in his case, they estimate over 300 different species will use a gopher tortoise burrow over the span of that burrow from the time that it's dug until the time that it's been abandoned and eventually probably cave in. They do live underground. They are not like the common turtles that we have here in Alabama. He's very distinctive with his front feet looking kind of like shovels or rakes, and that's what he uses to dig with. They don't pull completely in. They do that. They pull their neck in, and then they put their legs up. And when they do that, these tough scales on the front of his legs are fairly solid, but they protect him a lot. And his back legs will pull up and tuck underneath his shell. They have to have grasses and open areas to live in, and they have to have sandy soils.
This ecosystem is present in southern Mississippi, all the way to southern Georgia. In this ecosystem, the gopher tortoise eats many different plants that are located on the forest floor. The most important aspect of the gopher tortoise is its burrows. These burrows are dug in a zigzag pattern from 3 to 52 feet. In these burrows, over 360 different species live in harmony.
There are not that many other animals that dig burrows in South Alabama that allow these other animals refuge, or in some cases food. Well, their lifespan and reproductive habit or reproductive time frame is very similar to a human. They can live to be 60 to 80 years old. The eggs are about the size of a ping pong ball and fairly round and smooth. And when they hatch, they're a bright yellow and they're very soft, their shells are. And it takes upwards to 5 years for them to get to be the size of what we think of as, the box turtle, the eastern box turtle. And by the time they're in their teens, mid-teens, they're going to have reached enough size that they are, that their hormones and things will develop. They also do not become sexually mature until they're in their teens and are generally in their prime during their 20s and 30s. And the female will breed with multiple males, and she can actually store the sperm internally up to a year or more, and use it when the situation is conducive to her producing eggs. And their courting habits are very interesting. The male generally makes a circle. He starts to kind of gather his wagon ring around her, and he bobs his head, and eventually, if she doesn't show total disdain, he will start pecking on her shell. He'll just kind of go around and touch it and wait and see if she seems receptive. And they also compete. Males will compete. Not so much like other animals, but they do push each other and try to form a dominance over the other male, especially if it's a smaller, younger male. And as far as age, the researchers tell me that 60 to 80 is pretty typical. If they've lived to be, he's probably about 30. And if he has plenty of food and isn't in a situation where he would be wandering around in traffic a lot, so by the time they get to be this big, then their survival rate is very good.
Because of the length of the gopher tortoise's life cycle, it is difficult to document the gopher tortoise and also to rehabilitate the population of the gopher tortoise. There are many different reasons that contribute to the decline of gopher tortoises, but none are more dangerous than humans. The development of gopher tortoise lands, the roadways where gopher tortoises try to cross, and also controlled fires are all contributing to the loss of gopher tortoises.
It started a long time ago, and it was basically probably related indirectly to European settlement, only because the land use changed. And gopher tortoises don't need fire itself, but they need the habitat structure and composition that fire creates. But most of the dominant vegetation species in this part of the world are adapted for fire.
A lot of the longleaf pine forest was cut and used because the wood is very straight and very strong. And so as a result, they lost a lot of that habitat. That as man has settled more and more spaces, their habitat has shrunk, and that they have becomes limiting because of roads and things that provide danger to them if they're trying to cross a highway. Developers were going in and they would find a gopher tortoise burrow, and their way of dealing with it was to pour a slab of concrete over it. And it can take months for the animal to die because they have very slow metabolism, so they don't die like within a week. They live months and months. And a third factor is the loss of species or members of the species to people thinking that they can make pets out of them. And in the state of Alabama, as well as Florida, Georgia, and Mississippi, are under state protection, but are being considered for federal protection, which means that if you're caught with one, you do get in trouble.
There's lots of research happening to learn more about the habits of gopher tortoises and also to prevent habitat loss and population loss of the gopher tortoise.
A lot of the conservation work going forward with tortoises was translocating or relocating tortoises, was moving animals from one site to another. And part of that process involves pinning the animals at their new site so that you put them into an enclosure and hold them for at least 9 months now before releasing that enclosure. Because if you don't, they'll just take off and not stay on the site, which doesn't meet any of your conservation goals if you're trying to put them on a protected site. So what I'm looking at is during that pinning duration, during that 9 months to a year that they are in a pen, are we seeing social network formation like has been reported in natural populations? And does that social network affect site fidelity? Does that influence who stays on a site and who leaves? So the social network now has been described as social cliques. Mm-hmm. So these tortoises live in aggregations, and within those aggregations there are these groups that interact with each other, and they exhibit strong avoidance behaviors to other tortoises that are in the same exact spot. This is overlapping social structure, social network, where they share geographic space, but they don't interact with each other. It's like your high school lunchroom, right? There's the group here and the group there, and we're all in the same spot, but we're not necessarily interacting or getting along. In fact, avoiding each other if possible. And so that is what I'm looking for in my study is, do we get that same clique structure? Do we get something that's comparable to a natural occurring population? And does that clique structure influence tortoises staying on the site? If you have a good social group within that pen, are you likely to stay versus if you're out on the outside kind of not getting along with anybody, do you take off?
Now, students like Philip and a couple of other people who are trying to go that next step and get not only better information, but more detailed information, because while you're not actually manipulating the tortoises, you now know sort of what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so that is the next step. The data is going to be stronger. And we'll learn more, we hope, and figure out what to do and not do for tortoises that are being relocated.